I'm Jeff Mays of the New York Times, sitting in for Sam Roberts. Welcome to the New York Times Close Up. This week, rethinking brain health, from diagnosing Alzheimer's to caring for patients with dementia. But first, Eric Lipton is an investigative reporter at the New York Times, where he covers how money and political power intersect. He and his colleagues recently dug into blockchain data on President Trump's meme coin and found that nearly 1 million investors are sitting on about $3.8 billion in losses, even as the president walked away with a payout in the hundreds of millions of dollars. One investor described it as almost a legal scam. Eric joins us now from Washington. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
So, as we said, some of the details of what you guys uncovered from the president's financial disclosure reports were that 1 million investors lost almost $4 billion, but the president walked away with $636 million from his crypto investments, which was part of $2.2 billion that he's earned from his business ventures. This feels unprecedented in the American presidency, is it?
It's very unusual. In fact, it is unprecedented. There's never been anything like this, what Trump has done in terms of the money that he's made while president. The only type of thing you could compare it to, perhaps, is actually his first term. But this term, there's just really almost no way to compare the scale of the dollars that he's brought in through new business ventures that he and his sons created, some of them just before he was reelected as president. And the biggest chunks of the money are coming from cryptocurrency, but it's new real estate deals in different parts of the world, across Asia and Europe and the Middle East, and merchandising deals, and crypto in particular. But there's never been anything even remotely like this in American history, because presidents have generally sought to find ways, be they Democrat or Republican, to remove themselves from potential conflicts of interest by selling off assets or turning them over to lawyers in blind trust to run them. But the Trump family has really embraced the ability to make money and created all kinds of new conflicts of interest, as the president is both simultaneously appointing regulators that oversee the industries that he's profiting from.
So the meme coin endeavor, it fits into a broader pattern of what we're seeing in terms of how the president has used the presidency to increase his net wealth.
That's right. I mean, it's really across the landscape, pretty much wherever we look. There are examples of this, and I've been quite busy, along with other colleagues, writing stories about it, trying to document the many ways that the president and his family are making money off of the presidency. I mean, they include not only cryptocurrency, but the predictions markets that his sons are invested in at the same time as the Trump administration has largely, stepped back from regulating the predictions markets. It includes defense contractors that are seeking billions of dollars worth of federal contracts to build drones and other military devices, and that his sons are invested in. And it also includes, companies that are seeking to do mining on various metals that are needed for defense manufacturing and for other industrial production. And again, his sons are invested in those sectors at the same time as the president and his administration is pushing billions of dollars in federal funding to some of the same companies that his sons are invested in. So really, again, any single one of those would have been scandalous in any prior presidential administration. Right now they're just happening all around us, and crypto is the most extreme example, because it's $1.4 billion in 2025 revenues just from crypto, which it's just at a scale that completely blows away the amount of money that he's ever made before in a single year as a real estate developer.
And you mentioned the president making policy changes that would, boost crypto, for example, and also, the business he has with foreign governments. Those people have issues before the United States as well. I think the question that I have, and most viewers have, is, isn't this illegal?
The president and the vice president are the two only federal executive branch employees who are exempt from a criminal conflict of interest law that makes it a crime to take an action that can benefit yourself or your minor children. So not your adult children, but so it is a criminal offense to take a particular action that could bring you or your children financial benefit. But for whatever reason, I mean, the law was set up that the president, because the president's powers are so broad, and that he touches on basically every function of government, it was decided that the president should be exempt from that law. So there is no explicit criminal or even civil prohibition on the actions that he's taking. It's just always been an understanding in American history that presidents would take steps on their own to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. And the Trump family has decided not to do that.
And so even if Democrats went back to the House and Congress, there's no chance that they'll look into these endeavors, the president's financial endeavors?
Certainly. I mean, if the Dems win the House or the Senate, there will be subpoenas. Right now, the Democrats don't have the power to issue subpoenas to demand that the federal agencies respond to their many letters that they're sending that basically just get ignored. But if they do take the House or the Senate, then there will be loads of subpoenas that will investigate these matters, and they'll look for potentially any evidence of insider information that was given to perhaps the Trump family or to some other investor that is associated with them. And so, I mean, even if it's not necessarily explicitly illegal, there are reasons why you might want to investigate to just examine the circumstances of how, for example, did the Trump sons become aware that this tungsten deal in Kazakhstan that they are now invested in was being pushed by both the president and the Commerce Secretary, and then they and their partners invested in it. How did that play out? We don't have the specifics on that, and a subpoena might help learn more about that.
You talked about the investors, and one investor, of course, called this a legal scam. What has been the response to these people who have lost, tens of millions of dollars?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty muted, honestly. I mean, a lot of people that are in crypto are big bet takers, and they know that crypto is a truly speculative, kind of platform. It's not still trying to figure out what its use case is, other than as a way to speculate on it potentially going up. And so, we haven't heard a great deal of outrage. I mean, as you said, there's, nearly 1 million investors who went in behind Trump. And so what happened was the people who quickly went in and bought it, the Trump token started trading on January 17th, and it launched. It was worth 18 cents when it launched, and it went up to $70 before it started to crash. And so if you bought in those first few hours when it was rising from being worth 18 cents to being worth $72, you were going to make a load of money. But you had to get out quick, and you had to basically pump and dump. And the people who came in behind you, the MAGA followers who were like following Trump's lead, and Trump saying, this is a great thing, come and join my team on January 17th, 3 days before he's inaugurated. The people who came in behind that and were a little more slow in terms of buying the token, they're the ones that really suffered. And as the insiders were liquidating their holdings and taking the cash and profits, the people who came in behind them that bought were like the exit liquidation for the people who are really cashing out and making money. And there's nearly 1 million of them, and they lost almost $4 billion. But we haven't heard that much from them. It's something that we want to learn more about. Who are these people? How significant was that loss to them? How do they feel about that? Do they feel like they were misled by the president, or do they feel that they took a bet and they lost? And we don't really have a good insight into that, but we would like to learn more.
Finally, before I let you go, I'm just wondering, will this change the American presidency? Do you expect future presidents to sort of ignore the sort of traditional standards? And, how does this change the sort of definition, the idea of America that America has about itself?
I'm a little reluctant to predict exactly how things are going to play out because, it really depends on the next president and whether or not this becomes an anomaly, that is in the history books, but that we return to a standard where both Democrats and Republicans attempt to avoid conflicts of interest. And I mean, it really depends, is what I would say. And I don't think we know the answer to that yet. And whether or not Congress really are the people want to pass some kind of a constitutional amendment, or that Congress wants to act in some way to try to increase the ability to limit the financial endeavors of a sitting president. I mean, that's to some extent up to Congress and voters to decide. But as to how this will, whether or not this is a permanent feature of American politics, that the president and his family see it as an opportunity to make literally billions of dollars, is an open question. And really, I think no matter how anxious we are about it, we can't answer that question yet as to whether or not this is a permanent change in American democracy and society.
Eric, thanks so much for your detailed reporting, and we'll be following as you continue to follow the money.
Thank you so much. It's super important work, and thank you, readers, for supporting this work and viewers for watching it. It's a lot of labor involved in drilling down into all of this, and it takes a reporting team that's been working around the world on these stories to try to follow the money, and we're doing it, and it's a huge investment by the New York Times, and I'm proud to be a part of it. So
That's
thanks,
great. Yeah,
thanks
that's
for
clear from your reporting, so thanks.
thank you.
Now we'll take a step back and ask who else is benefiting in this financial gray area, and can the law keep up? David Yaffe-Bellany covers the crypto industry for the New York Times, and his reporting has shown how these coins are structured, who gets in early, and why sophisticated traders were positioned to profit while many small investors took the hit. He's also been tracking the legal and regulatory environment where federal enforcement has pulled back, even as experts say Trump could still face investor lawsuits. David, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So I'm wondering if you can just explain a little bit about this process. How does a coin go from launch to sort of surging and then having this sharp drop? What's the process there? And it also appears that the president set up a situation for himself where he would benefit regardless because he got fees off of every transaction on the coin. So maybe you can explain that a little bit.
Sure. The process is surprisingly simple. It's very easy to create a new coin. Anybody can do it with very little technical background. It just takes a couple of minutes. There are websites set up that basically allow you with a few clicks to send a new coin into the world. Once that coin is out there, people can buy it through a bunch of different means. They set up special crypto accounts that, are able to kind of stock up on the coins. That's the sort of like basic process of how this works. Now, how do people make money from that? Like if you're creating a coin, how do you make money? There are two different ways. One is that you might keep a bunch of those coins for yourself. And if people are really excited and they buy it, then the value of those coins will go up. And so the value of your holdings will go up. And so you can profit in that way. But Trump and Trump's team structured his meme coin in such a way that he would make money regardless of whether the price went up or down, because he collected transaction fees every time the coin was traded. So ultimately, the Trump meme coin surged and then crashed. Those holdings that Trump and his partners control are still worth something, but their value's gone down a lot. But they made money regardless.
Wow. And so these investors, who are these people? Are these just regular folks who, day trade in cryptocurrency? And, it feels like this process leaves open the opportunity for foreign governments to sort of have influence by investing in this coin. Who are these investors that you found?
The coin attracted a wide range of investors. Some of them are Trump true believers who wanted to buy something associated with him. Some of them are experienced crypto traders who stock up on all different types of meme coins and saw a profit opportunity here. In some cases, the people who bought the meme coin were based in foreign countries. And, if you're a foreigner, you're actually not allowed to donate to the US political process in the way that an American could. So this became kind of an indirect way for people shut out of the political donation system to channel money to Trump and his family, even when they wouldn't have been permitted to historically.
There's been changes to SEC regulations that appear to allow this to have happened. Was President Trump responsible for those changes to the regulations? And, how would those regulations normally work to prevent something like this from happening?
Under the Biden administration, the SEC was really tough on crypto. It brought lawsuits against a bunch of crypto companies, and it argued that most cryptocurrencies should be classified as securities, meaning that they're subject to the same strict regulations that apply to stocks and bonds. Trump abandoned that stance. He said on the campaign trail that he would fire the chair of the SEC, install somebody new. He did that, and the SEC has embraced a much more kind of enthusiastic pro-crypto approach. Among the things that the SEC has done is it's declared that meme coins are not securities, so they won't be subject to those strict regulations. So that's kind of the connection between what the SEC has been doing and this specific Trump venture.
And I'm wondering, with this case and some of the other ones you've covered, I wonder how does this crypto venture fit into the sort of broader pattern of what we're seeing with celebrities and political figures putting their names on these tokens. This certainly feels unprecedented because you have the President of the United States who's putting his name behind this. So I'm wondering how that works out in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you could think of it as both very unoriginal, but also unprecedented. Unoriginal because Trump is far from the first celebrity to put his name on a meme coin. All sorts of people have been doing this over the years. But it's unprecedented because a US president had never done that, obviously. And, not only was he doing it, he did it just days before his inauguration. I mean, the kind of hype and attention of the inauguration ended up becoming a vehicle to promote the meme coin, which is a source of personal profits for his family. I mean, that is something we have never seen before in the course of US history.
And I'm wondering, is the president going to be susceptible to these investor lawsuits as well? Is that a risk for him and his family as people realize these massive losses?
Yeah, we've spoken with legal experts who argue that, there could be grounds for someone who bought the coin and lost money to bring some sort of private suit against the family and its business partners who put out this coin. How that will actually play out, it's unclear, but it's a sort of angle of attack that exists.
David, thanks so much for your reporting, and we appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, promising new research on brain health. Two new studies out this week are raising interesting questions about brain health. One looks at whether blood tests could help diagnose and even predict Alzheimer's disease. The other finds that medical cannabis may help dementia patients with agitation. Pam Belluck covers health and medicine for the New York Times. Thanks for joining us, Pam.
Thank you for inviting me.
So briefly, I'm wondering what these new studies found regarding how blood tests can help with Alzheimer's diagnosis and treatment.
Yeah, so currently the sort of standard of diagnosing Alzheimer's is much more involved than a blood test, right? To get a definitive diagnosis, you need to either get a PET scan or you need a spinal tap. Both of those are very expensive. They're not available everywhere. Not everybody wants to have a lumbar puncture in their spine. And so for several years now, the field has been moving toward developing blood tests that ideally can do the same thing. And what these new studies that we reported on this week found is that they're getting a lot more accurate. They are becoming something that can eventually be used in your primary care doctor's office. You don't have to go to a neurologist or other specialist, so that will make it a lot more accessible. And I think the thing that I found the most exciting was this idea that those types of blood tests now are being used for people who already have symptoms. You're having memory problems, you go into your doctor and you say, what is this? Is it Alzheimer's or is it another dementia, right? But what the field really wants to get to is a place where we are with something like risks of heart disease or diabetes, where you can actually predict somebody's risk before they start having cognitive impairment. And so one of the new studies that I reported on this week was one that was actually able to predict in people who were cognitively healthy how likely it would be that they would develop Alzheimer's cognitive impairment in 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. And that kind of thing ultimately will be quite transformative for the field, because if we can figure out how to predict your risk, and crucially, once there starts to be medication that can help you slow down the process of developing these symptoms, then you have a situation where people can actually do something in advance, like they can with things like heart disease and diabetes.
And so does that mean that asymptomatic people can go in or will be able to go in and get this test and then sort of plan a treatment plan for themselves?
That's the idea. That's sort of the holy grail. We are definitely not there yet for several reasons. One major one is that there's really nothing, unfortunately, that can be done for people who don't have symptoms yet. And so doctors and researchers are definitely not recommending that people without symptoms go and get these tests now. They're only being used right now to kind of evaluate people for being eligible for clinical trials. But that day could be on the horizon within even a few years, because there are two large clinical trials of drugs that we're expecting to get results from within the next year or two, where they did test drugs on people without symptoms, and they are, looking to see whether those drugs allowed them to delay the onset of Alzheimer's beyond what they would have already, otherwise gotten.
Right.
Those tend to, if those show that they're effective, then this kind of blood test will be something that people will be, wanting to use.
So diving in a bit specifically, what are these tests telling doctors right now? What specific results are they giving doctors, and how are those results helping families who may be dealing with this issue?
Yeah, so the tests, first of all, there are these two proteins that are associated with Alzheimer's disease. One of them is called amyloid. That's the thing that builds up plaques in people's brains if they have Alzheimer's. Amyloid tends to form maybe 20 years or so before you have symptoms. It's a sort of slow process. Then the second protein is called tau, which comes along later. And it is the thing that forms tangles in the brain. So people think of Alzheimer's as plaques and tangles. Tau is the thing that does that. And tau is the thing that is much more closely connected to your symptoms. As tau accumulation gets worse, cognitive decline gets worse. So these blood tests are detecting both tau and amyloid. And what they're doing is it's sort of like a staging thing. It's sort of like, okay, you have a level of above a certain amount of both of these proteins. That tells us that you are at this stage of cognitive decline and sort of disease progression. And they can give you some estimate of, there's a lot of variability in Alzheimer's, but they can give you some estimate of like how quickly you're going to progress. So, for some people, for people with symptoms who are getting these tests and, getting a confirmation that what they have is Alzheimer's, there are some treatments that they can have. None of them are very effective yet, but there's work being done to try to, develop more effective treatments. But also, I think people have, judging from the comments on our story, there's a range of opinions about this. Some people are like, I don't want to know if there's nothing really, significant that I can do.
Right.
If there's no cure, if there's no really effective treatment, this is going to be really stressful for me. I don't want to know. But probably just as many people, judging from our comments, say, I'd like to have a sense of what my future might look like. This might help me plan my work time frame, my retirement, my finances, talk with my family. So I think it's a very individual decision, but it's probably helpful to at least have the option to decide and to discuss with your doctor.
I want to move on to one of your other articles about medical cannabis and agitation and dementia patients. So there was another study that found that cannabis could help, or CBD, THC treatments could help with agitation and dementia patients. Tell us a little bit about that. Does that mean people should go out and start buying medical marijuana for their aging dementia relatives?
Not off the shelf, not without consultation with a medical professional, the experts tell me. But this study was actually very, very interesting to me, because we write a lot about, when people talk a lot about Alzheimer's and dementia, of course you talk about the memory problems and the thinking problems. But a really big issue in people with these conditions is agitation. And agitation could be anything from, being volatile, being, kind of temperamental, being angry. But it also can be things like repetitive movements and sleep disturbances and things that we sort of associate with anxiety. And it's just incredibly common in this population, and very, very hard to deal with for both the patients and the families and the caregivers. And right now, the current treatments are things like antipsychotics and opioids and benzodiazepines, and many of them either don't work or they have really unpleasant and in some cases, unpleasant side effects. People get confused, they get sort of doped up, they can't really communicate, and it also can hasten mortality in this population. So this group of very, mainstream respected scientists decided to try this combination of THC, which is the kind of component of cannabis that produces a high in higher doses, and CBD, which doesn't. And they sort of whipped up this combination that isn't kind of currently available in that dosing, but you can probably find things like it. And they tested it on patients who had advanced dementia. These were patients who were very frail. They were in hospice or eligible for hospice, often for other conditions. And they really got remarkable results.
Right.
They had, compared to the group that was on placebo, something like 90% of the patients who received the cannabinoid treatment had a almost immediate easing of their agitation. So I think, that's something that really, this was presented at a big Alzheimer's conference this week. And people, again, sort of like very, stalwart establishment types in the field were really impressed with it. And, I think it's going to lead to more studies and maybe, of approval of this specific combination to be used for patients.
And, I found it interesting, your article, they talked about, having Alzheimer's patients die with dignity and without agitation. So that was fascinating. Just quickly, could you tell us, looking at these two studies, what does that tell us about the evolution of studying brain health and developing treatments for brain health? As we know, the United States is an aging population. So this appears like it'll be an issue going forward.
Oh, yeah. The need is only going to grow. And I think what these studies kind of both all sort of point to is a couple of things. One, there is an expectation that we're going to have more and more of these patients. It's going to be more emotionally costly and financially costly to society. We need to find ways of dealing with all this whole sort of range of symptoms. And I think that it signals that there's progress in the field, that there's some optimism that we may actually be able to figure out treatments that can help people with the cognitive symptoms. And with the agitation thing, I think it's a sign, and a very important sign, that people are paying attention to not just the cognitive problems, but this whole sort of basket of other things that goes along with these conditions that is, as you say, prevents people from dying peacefully. It makes it so difficult for their family members. And so I think that's a really optimistic sign that there's like a more holistic look at this condition and some of the attributes of it.
Pam, thanks so much for your reporting, helping us to decipher these studies. We appreciate it. Hopefully you can come back and we can talk about this a little more.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
That's it for our show. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Jeff May, sitting in for Sam Roberts. If you've enjoyed these conversations and want to support more programs like this, please consider donating at the link on your screen. Thanks for watching.